Hey everyone, Brody here with our channel Let's Table It. I have a copy of Chaos Cove back here by Hutchu Games and Ape Games. And today we're going to do an official how to play video for this game. This is a game for 2 to 4 players. Chaos Cove is played over 4 rounds, and in each round players control 4 different heroes, and then different 4 heroes in the following round. The first part of the round consists of players moving their heroes to different locations in town. Each hero has a different ability, and each location has its own effect as well. And there's possible resources to gain depending on which location you're in. Players can also attack face-up invader tiles by spending combat points, which should be equal to or greater than the value of the invader. There are 2 types, barbarians that invade on land and pirates that invade by sea. If you don't fend off the invaders, they will attack and destroy forts and sink your ships. So the way to win the game is to have the most points for having forts and ships in play, for having rum party cards, and for defeating invaders. Each player will choose a color and take the 6 crew, the 6 ships, and the 6 forts of that color. Then each player will start with a starting fort construction card and a starting ship construction card, and a player aid card to help you throughout the game. 2 crew members from each player are placed on the fountain area on the center in the main board. Resources are placed out in piles, and players start with 1 of each type of resource, which would be 1 cannon, 1 saber, 1 rum, 1 food, 1 planks token, and 1 gunpowder. Rum, foods, planks, and gunpowder are considered unlimited in the game, but the cannons and the sabers are limited to what's provided in the game. 4 circular hero tiles are then randomly dealt out to each player, and players will take their matching hero figures and place them on the matching tile. If you are playing a game with less than 4 players, then you will still make 4 sets of 4 tiles so that all 16 tiles are used. You will just create some dummy players. The doubloons are placed near the board, and each player will start the game with 5. The hero cards are then shuffled, and players are randomly dealt out 5 cards each, with the remaining forming a draw deck. The construction cards are placed into stacks above the board using the numbers on the card. There should be 6 identical cards per stack, and the remaining 16 cards have an asterisk on them instead of a number, and these are shuffled together and split into 2 equal decks and placed face down next to the other cards. The top card of each deck is then flipped over face up. The pirate tokens are then placed into 4 sets according to the number listed on them. Each will be used for a round, so the tiles with the number 1 are randomly placed out face down on each sea space, and the same happens with barbarian tokens, and the 1 tokens are randomly placed out in the land spaces. Whoever most recently touched a meeple is the first player, or you can randomly choose a first player, and that player will begin the game with the first player marker. The first player will place 1 of their ships on the top ship space adjacent to the top pirate sea space, with the next player placing their ship on the top ship space adjacent to the second pirate sea space, and so on for the 3rd and 4th players. The same is done by placing forts on the land spaces on the land side of the board. If playing a 2-player game, then players will choose 1 of the available construction cards for free. And if that card is a new ship, then you'll place out a second ship on any of the remaining open ship spaces. Same with choosing a new fort card. If that's chosen, then you'll place a fort on one of the remaining open land spaces. Now that the game is set up and ready to go, the game is ready to be played. There are 6 phases in this game for each round, and in the first phase, players place heroes. Players will take turns placing out 1 hero figure on one of the 12 locations on the board. When placing your hero, you will need to keep in mind that you can have up to 3 different effects depending on your choice. First, the location effect, which is different from each location, the hero effect, which is different for each of your heroes, and then resources that players can gain in different places depending on your location that the player chooses on the board to place their hero. Locations will give you effects to trade in resources, draw additional resources. Some will give you information about the strength of an enemy by flipping its token over. Some will give you increased combat points for when you battle later in this round. And others will give you some type of advantage that you can plan to use to take some type of advantage in this game. Heroes will do similar actions that will potentially help you with a certain type of plan that I hope you will be making, because connecting these actions together will benefit you more when deciding on what you are trying to focus on during that round. Lastly, you can choose up to 2 of the resources shown on your chosen location. A resource can be taken twice only if its symbol is shown twice on that location. Players will place out their hero, perform the 3 effects in any order that they would like, and then the next player will go in clockwise order. When placing heroes, players can play any hero cards in their hand that matches any hero currently already on the board. This can be done before or after placing the hero for that turn. When playing a hero card, this card is discarded and the effect is then applied. Now, players might want to keep their hero cards if they are planning for some combat, as players can also discard a hero card to increase their combat value. Also, when placing heroes, only 2 can be placed out in the same location, but there are some hero effects that can break that rule. Again, your choice of location will determine your location effect as well as the potential resources that you can grab. Cannons and sabers are essential for defeating invaders, so players should stock up on these early. Players will take turns placing out one of their heroes at a time until each player has placed out 2 total heroes. Then, in player order, players can choose to pay 3 doubloons to place out a 3rd or a 4th hero. If you don't want to use your money, then you can pass. This occurs until all players have passed, and when a player passes, they can no longer play any of their hero cards. Each player can then place out a maximum of 4 heroes total in each round. The second phase is using your construction cards, and for each construction card that you have, which you have for either building a ship or a fort, you will then take the resources listed on your construction cards. Or you can perform the listed trade action listed on them. A trade can only be performed once per card, and you need to have the required resources that it requires to perform the action. Everyone has 1 starting ship and 1 starting fort, so players can use those plus any others gained throughout the game. And hero cards cannot be played during this phase of the game. The third phase is buying additional construction cards. Starting with the first player, players take turns buying 1 construction card at a time. The purchase cost is shown on the top of each card, and players can keep on buying cards until all players have passed. These cards can be important as they will let you gain more resources in Phase 2, but also they will allow you to attack enemies on the board when you place a ship or a fort in that location. So if you're buying a ship card, you will place a ship on an empty ship space on the board. This can be a new location where no one is at or below someone else's. You can choose any of the 3 spaces, and the 3rd space has a wind icon which allows the ship to avoid combat in Phase 5 if needed or if you want to. And just like the ship, if a fort card is purchased, then you will place a fort piece in any available empty fort space. When a ship or a fort is built, one of your crew members in the center of the board is removed. If all ship or fort spaces on the board are filled up, then the players are unable to purchase any of those cards. Construction cards are not automatically reset until the end of the round, so players will need to plan accordingly. Again, it's important to know that when you purchase a ship or a fort card, you will need to place a ship or a fort onto the board. Next is Phase 4 of the game, which is the attack phase, which is done in player order. Players can attack any one face-up invader where they have a ship or a fort, or any that are in the breakthrough area. And I'll explain the breakthrough area soon. To defeat the invader, players will need to have a combat strength equal to or more than the combat value shown on that token. There are several ways to gain combat strength to defeat an invader, and these include using cannon tokens from a player's supply to fight pirates. You will flip that token over to show an X, show that it's been used, and you will gain a +3 to your total combat strength. Similarly, you can use a saber token to fight barbarians, doing the same thing, flipping any of those over, gaining +3 to your combat against them. Gunpowder can be used to fight any invader, and it will add +1 to your combat strength. Gunpowder, when used, is returned to the general supply. And as a side note, no monkeys are harmed in Chaos Cove. The monkeys receive excellent pay and benefits for delivering gunpowder to the front lines. Players can discard hero cards if this hero is currently on the board, and this will increase the combat strength. If fighting against a pirate, you will gain the value shown in blue. If fighting against a barbarian, then you will have the value shown in green to add to your total combat value. In addition, other players can play hero cards to help add to the combat score to the active player. However, the active player is not required to accept the help. If the active player has Gus, one of the characters in play, they can discard their crew on the board in the fountain area to gain a +2 combat per crew member for your land or sea attack. The crew is placed on their side to show that it's been used. Lastly, if the active player has a hero in the fortress on the board, then they can gain +2 for their combat strength for all combats this round. If a player has a combat strength through any combination of these means or more than the combat strength of the enemy, the invader is defeated and the player claims the invader token. It will be used for victory points at the end of the game. Players will continue attacking in player order until everyone has passed or all face-up invaders are defeated. Players want to keep in mind how many invaders are in the breakthrough area and defeat these invaders if possible. Later in the round, undefeated invaders will move to this area, and if an invader cannot be placed in one of the 3 positions in the breakthrough area, then all players lose the game together. The 5th phase of the game is defending against any leftover invaders still standing. All invader tokens are flipped over and each invader will attack in sequence from the top to the bottom, starting with the pirates. Each invader attacks the top ship or fort in its adjacent section, and it then goes down and so on. Combat is the same as explained when attacking the invaders. And if a player wins in a fight when defending, they also will take that invader's token and keep it till the end of the game. If a player cannot defeat an invader, then that invader destroys the adjacent ship or fort. It is removed from the board and returned to the player's supply. If losing a ship, then you will choose one of your ship cards from your hand of cards to discard. If losing a fort, then you will discard one of your fort cards of your choice. Damage to an invader never crosses over from one combat to another. If a player's ship space is in the 3rd space marked with a win symbol, then they can choose to not fight the adjacent pirate and move their ship to another space not adjacent to the same pirate. If an invader remains undefeated because there was no ship or fort to attack, or by defeating all the ships or forts that were there in that area, then they are moved to the breakthrough space toward the bottom of the map. There are 3 spaces for pirates and 3 spaces for barbarians. The game ends immediately and all players will lose the game if either 4 pirates or 4 barbarians break through. The 6th phase is the end of turn phase, and players pass their 4 hero tiles clockwise to the next player. If you are playing with less than 4 players, you will then move tiles from the dummy player following the same direction. All hero figures are then retrieved from the board and placed on their matching tiles. If the top card from a construction card pile is gone, then the top card is flipped over, so that each pile has 1 card face up for the new round. For the 2 columns that have cards with 3 icons on them, then the top card is discarded if it wasn't taken that round and a new one is revealed. All used cannons and sabers are then flipped back over to be used again for this next round. The next wave of invaders will then be placed out on the board face down, and you'll place them out according to what round it is. The player with the first player marker will pass that to the player to their left, and a new turn and round begins. There is no hand limit to how many cards that you have throughout the game, and a player can play as many as they wish during phase 1, which is the playing out heroes phase, phase 4, which is attacking, or phase 5, which is defending. Remember, the card can only be played if the hero is also in play on the board. The game ends after 4 total rounds, and you will keep track of the rounds according to which wave of invader tokens that you are using. If the breakthrough area never gets overran, then players will gain victory points for ships, forts, and rum cards, and the points for those are shown on those cards. The player who has the lowest number of invader tokens, they will discard all of those tokens, with all other players discarding the same amount. All other players will then gain additional points according to how many invader tokens they have left, and the points are shown on the player aid card. Note that the combat strength does not matter when scoring, only the total number of defeated invaders. The players then total up their points from ships, forts, rum cards, and points from invader tokens, and the player with the most victory points is declared the protector of Chaos Cove, thus winning the game. In case of a tie, the tied player who has the most defeated invader tiles is the winner. If still a tie, then the tied player with the most resources is the winner. If still a tie, the player that took the last turn is the winner. There needs to be a winner, as there are no ties in Chaos Cove. And that's Chaos Cove. Again, the game takes about 2 hours to play. It's designed by Martin Wallace, and it's published by Hutchu Games and Ape Games.
I don't know if I could do it.
Yo, you're upside down.
I know. I haven't done the box trick for a long time, so I can't do it. It's kind of hard.